Games Workshop has added a female Adeptus Custodes in their upcoming Codex Adeptus Custodes book that will arrive later this month. And then they gaslit fans by claiming that there have always been female Adeptus Custodes. And now former employees are coming out to join in the gaslighting. One such that we will talk about today is Nick Davis. Before we get into this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. I wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com. And Nick Davis, who is a former Games Workshop employee who worked on the company's White Dwarf magazine, took to social media to not only signal his wokeness in an attempt to defend the company's Adeptus Custodes retcon, but also did it to gaslight fans, hobbyists, and enthusiasts of Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000. So, just to provide some context, there were some excerpts that were leaked regarding this addition of a female Adeptus Custodes. One of the excerpts reads this: Custodian Calidis Tarvolia Kesh stood upon the bridge of a Cobra class destroyer named Vigilant Flame. The warship belonged to the mighty Battlefleet Solar. She lingered in the shadows at the back of the bridge, positioned at a spot where she could observe the actions of every crew member, be they in the instrumentation pits, at the armament shrines, or in the case of Shipmaster Lethwick, stood ramrod straight before his command throne. So obviously referring to Custodian Calidis Tarvalia Kesh as a woman. And then it was made abundantly clear that she is indeed an Adeptus Custodius because she wields a Guardian Spear. This excerpt reads, Kesh was warned before anyone else aboard. Sensing his sudden empiric energy spike coupled with the surge of overpressure and sharp temperature drop that presaged a teleport strike, her Guardian Spear was leveled and armed before the first cry of alarm or howl of a klaxon rang through the bridge. This obviously was indeed a retcon. Former World of Warcraft team lead Mark Kern pointed this out. He shared a number of excerpts throughout the past decades that made it very clear that the Adeptus Custodes are men. One of them was from the Rogue Trader rules in 1987. It said the Adeptus Custodes is the Emperor's inner guard, the members of which are privileged in being permitted to serve upon the Emperor, attending to his needs, receiving and recording his directions. These men never leave Earth and only rarely leave the Imperial Palace, an endless black hive of forbidden technology and subterranean passages delving deep within the bowels of the planet. He then shared excerpts from both the 7th and 8th editions, which were released of the Codex Adeptus Custodes, which were released in 2017 and 2018. In them, they refer to the Adeptus Custodes as a brotherhood of demigods, and it makes it clear they were recruited from the sons of nobles. One reads, "It is known that all custodians begin their lives as the infant sons of the noble houses of Terra. It is a mark of incredible prestige to surrender one's child to this most glorious of callings within the Imperium, and many notable clans amongst the Terran aristocracy have willingly given up almost entire generations of newborn sons to earn it." So very clear that the Adeptus Custodes were all male. We have since received confirmation from the official Warhammer account on X. They've been responding with kind of this canned message to a number of people, pointing out that this is indeed a retcon. And they're not only saying that it's not a retcon, but they're trying to gaslight fans into thinking that there have always been female custodians, and this is what they posted. Since the first of the 10,000 were created, there have always been female custodians. We just went over the evidence that shows that that is indeed a lie, and Games Workshop is now lying to their own customers about the changes that they're making to the lore. Well, it's not just Games Workshop doing it. As I said at the beginning of this video, one of their former employees is doing it as well. And Nick Davis is bringing out the old, it's always been that way. It's always been that way. They've always done this. They've it's just, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's the same tired tactics over and over and over again. Tell a lie, repeat the lie enough until hopefully people begin to believe it. And that's exactly what Nick Davis is doing here. And he's trying to say that they were always doing this. This is how it's always operated over there at Games Workshop. But he posted this in response to Mark Kern's thread regarding all of the changes and how they were indeed changes. And he said, well, now it is clear why you're a former team lead, eh? Seriously, 40K lore is unreliable narration at best. myth, legend, and contradiction abound throughout the background history, heck, even through our own history. And if possible, female Marines, custodies, and LGBTQ plus representation make you lose your water. That's on you and you alone. I have no clue why he's adding LGBTQ plus into this. It has nothing to do with the addition of a female Adeptus Custodes. But obviously, this is the agenda, and you see this is the agenda coming, and so they will probably be adding LGBTQ plus two. This is what they're going to do. They take an inch, or you give them an inch, they take a mile. So I expect transgender Space Marines in the near future because they're already kind of lumping that in there. These activists who are former employees now. And so just imagine if this is a former employee, what kind of employees they have now working over there. He followed this up with a more lengthy post. We'll scroll down here to look at the post. He says, I worked for Games Workshop for a very specific part of its history. I started in the mail order trolls and worked my way up into the studio, finishing out my career with Games Workshop, working on White Dwarf Magazine, UK, and then US edition. During my time at the company, especially during my White Dwarf years, I had one mission. I wanted to share the joy the Warhammer hobby gave me, to lift up that mystic veil and show who you, the average gamer like me, could participate no matter your skill level. In short, take some of the mystery out of what is dry brushing, LOL. I like to think I mostly succeeded in this mission, and I am heartened when I hear from now vets in the hobby who cite me as a positive influence. So that's just all fluff, trying to butter you up before he lies to your face, right? And then and that's what he does. So there's a little bit more butter up here. He says, the hobby, as I like to call it, is supposed to be fun, a uniting force between gamers to create friendships, a social function, something to be enjoyed and shared. And then he absolutely just straight lies to you right here. You never were supposed to build silos of lore, because the very idea of the Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 universe was the history was so convoluted and fragmented, there was no such thing as fact. This guy is trying to say that there is no such thing as fact in the Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 universe. And he's saying that's how it's always been. I don't think, I mean, that is just such a obvious lie. I mean, he just says it with it. See, like writes it without any hint of sarcasm, just straight faced. And because he adds, he says, see, everything was supposed to contradict. That was the purpose. What? The purpose was to contradict. Like I said, tell a lie, repeat the lie, say that this was always what it was, spread the lie that that's how it always was, to try and dupe people into thinking that that is the truth. I mean, utter nonsense here. Everything was supposed to contradict. That was the purpose. Wow. And then he goes on and says, that being said, I'm overjoyed seeing the hobby that once gave me a means to live, being so inclusive, seeing female LGBTQ plus gamers and seeing them represented at the highest level of Games Workshop toy soldiers is pure joy. So clearly admitting here that he's an absolute activist, trying to push feminism, push transgender ideology, push homosexual disordered lifestyles into Games Workshop, trying to normalize this stuff, trying to dupe people into thinking that stuff is somehow decent by claiming that he's overjoyed by it. I doubt it. It's not pure joy. It's clearly lust, clearly sinful. This stuff is it's not good for you. It is destructive. And you can see the fruits of those sins all around us. Just look at how society is crumbling down. He goes on and says, I love it. I wish I had seen more of it during my time at Games Workshop, but we are here now, and you've made this old white dwarfer very proud. So let's get into his first claim. I've kind of talked about it a little bit here, but I think this makes it even clearer, or just shows just how obvious the lie is. If the whole purpose, like he says, the purpose was to contradict, and there's no such thing as a fact, why then is this inclusion of a female Adeptus Custodes in the Codex Adeptus Custodes? Why does Games Workshop sell codices that seemingly share facts about the game and the lore, because this is what it says on the Games Workshop blog about the Adeptus Custodes Codex. Inside, you'll find everything you need to play the Adeptus Custodes and Sisters of Silence in the current edition of Warhammer 40,000, including a chunk of juicy background lore, 4 detachments, 18 data sheets, crusade content, and combat patrol rules. Let's actually go over here and look at the Adeptus Custodes Collector's Edition and how they describe this. Right here inside this 112-page hardback book, you'll find background material exploring the role of the Adeptus Custodes and Sisters of Silence, their subfactions, and how they're recruited and trained. That doesn't sound like it's giving you contradictory information. Doesn't sound like it's giving you false information. Doesn't sound like the purpose of this book is to be contradictory. Doesn't sound like there's supposed to be no facts that they're trying to sell you here. Sounds like they're trying to sell you facts about the world. 18 data sheets with the profiles, weapons, and potent abilities of every Adeptus Custodes and Sisters of Silence unit. No facts. No facts. Contradictory, right? This is on the Warhammer website. On the codex that's making the change. It's making the retcon. Crusade rules for sending your force on vital missions all across the galaxy in the name of the Emperor. Combat patrol rules. And painting guide for Tristran's Gilded Blades. So I think it's very obvious that this guy is just completely lying. There are facts. It's not just made to be contradictory. You can just see that right here on the codex, the page for the codex that's coming out later this month, April 27th, that has the retcon in it. And then we get down here, this idea that it doesn't have any kind of like internal consistency and it's always trying to be contradictory, I think we can just easily dismiss that, given the fact that the universe does have a lot of internal consistency, and you can note that just by its success. Because J.R.R. Tolkien talked about this concept in his essay on fairy stories. What really happens is that the story maker proves a successful sub-creator. He makes a secondary world which your mind can enter. Inside it, what he relates is true. It accords with the laws of that world. You therefore believe it while you are, as it were, inside. And I think Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 had done a pretty good job of that up until recently, of creating that secondary world and people believing that it was true when they were obviously engaging with the tabletop collectibles and the tabletop game, whether it's in the novels from the Black Library or even the video games that it's produced. So I think they did a really good job with that, because they did have an internal logic and it stuck true to the laws of that world. Obviously, there's like the chaos and warp and all of those things, but those things do indeed have rules and how they work and how it all interacts. But now, I think they have a massive, massive problem on their hands, because this is what Tolkien says. The moment disbelief arises, the spell is broken. The magic, or rather art, has failed. You are then out in the primary world again, looking at the little abortive secondary world from outside. If you are obliged by kindliness or circumstance to stay, then disbelief must be suspended or stifled. Otherwise, listening and looking would become intolerable. But this suspension of disbelief is a substitute for the genuine thing, a subterfuge we use when condescending to games or make-believe, or when trying more or less willingly to find what virtue we can in the work of an art that has for us failed. And I think that is indeed what is going to happen. I think it's already happening. This stuff is now failing because it no longer has internal consistency. It is breaking its own rules. It's breaking its own lores. It's actively retconning its own lore. And what eventually will happen, as we've seen with numerous other IPs that have done this, that have used feminism ideology, transgender ideology, woke ideology, such as Marvel, such as Star Wars, is that people reject it. And it no longer becomes as prominent as what it once was. People find other things to replace it. And that's what's going to happen with Warhammer here. They've done this to themselves. They have made a power play to try and assert this evil ideology onto people. And people will indeed reject it because they do recognize that it is not natural and it is not true. It just isn't. It's just not true. So that's what I have to say to Nick Davis and about his comments. He's just another gaslighter, clearly trying to push this evil agenda, using Warhammer to do so. It is disgusting. It's repugnant. It shows who he truly is. And at the end of the day, this shows who Games Workshop really is. And you can say that it's because of the influence of BlackRock and Vanguard. And sure, they are definitely, I'm not going to excuse them and their influence. It's definitely part of it. But at the end of the day, people like Games Workshop could say no to that. They can say no, but they chose to do this. So they've chose to attack their own fan base, attack their own customers, and they've chose to ruin what they created. And it's unfortunate, but I suggest finding alternatives. There are plenty of alternatives out there now with intergalactic, grim, dark settings. With Space Marines. I know Richard Fox has a lot of stuff out there, novels that he's written. So there are alternatives to this stuff, and people will be creating newer stuff as well in response to this. So I'm looking forward to a lot of that stuff because as this stuff gets co-opted, destroyed by these woke ideologies, new things will rise up to replace it. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, but to always speak the truth.